and I'm a visual artist from Ireland. So my presentation is called Strange Terrain because I think it's a strange terrain that I occupy. And I've been thinking about the context, how I was going to make this presentation in the notion of the workshop. So there was a couple of topics I wanted to cover quickly, which was function, dysfunction, invisible, erased, and visible, canonical erasure and amnesia, and activating hidden stories of those who are othered, optimism, pessimism, optimism. So when you think of Ireland, you think of this wonderful, rural, green space. We are a very rural country, and I do live towards the west of Ireland. And this is the notion that, like Hugo's presentation, our tourist board gives this idea of this idealistic notion of what our landscape looks like. But in reality, we built 250,000, actually we built 500,000 of these type of houses over the past 15 years, and they are never going to be lived in. They're all around every single rural village in Ireland, and they are a kind of a hang-up from our colonialist history. We were colonized for 800 years by the British and only got independence 100 years ago. And we lost our visual culture. We lost our understanding about vernacular heritage. So we looked to people, especially America, as the ideal for what we would use as our built environment. And unfortunately, the cookie cutter home was the thing that we idealized. So we built thousands upon thousands of this dysfunctional architecture. And I lived in one for 7 years, and I like to think of it as a kind of an artist in residence thing that I did, where I lived there. Now, I should give you a little bit of a background to myself. Some of you have already heard me talk here in Kaunas. I was a single parent at 20. I had my first child in Ireland, and I lived on social welfare. I'm from a very impoverished working class background. As such, people like me don't go on to further education. They are put on the periphery. And especially in our country, we swapped one colonizer, i.e. the British, for another, which was the Catholic Church. And that really despised women like me, if you are familiar with Irish history. So I lived in one of these, which is kind of a cookie cutter home. And I kind of went a little bit mad trying to fit in with this ideal of having everything perfect, which a lot of people in Ireland fell under that kind of notion during our Celtic Tiger boom. Our amazing Cassandra, our soothsayer, Sinead O'Connor, said that Ireland was suffering post-traumatic stress disorder since the famine, and she was absolutely right, because we became obsessed with property ownership. That's what she felt. And everybody wanted to get one of these houses, and they paid €300,000 to buy one of these each. Amazing examples of dysfunctional architecture. I tried to fit in by joining the local residents association so I wouldn't be seen as other. And I made a piece of work called Levitating, where I spent, 7 days jumping while doing my housework. 1, 2, 3, jump, 1, 2, 3, jump, 1, 2, 3, jump. And with the help of my partner, took a photograph of me in mid-jump to capture an optical illusion of movement that I was levitating impossibly 6 inches off the ground. Why did I do that? Because in our Irish Constitution, it says, Article 41.2.3, a woman's place is in the home. I should not even be in Kaunas today. I should be in my home. And this is an impossible position that I, by the unlucky possibility of being born without a penis, have found myself in. And this is an impossible situation. So I made work about being other, being not quite accepted by making this piece of work. Anyway, it was a very successful piece of work. You probably, some of you I recognise from the last time I spoke my work, know that this went on to be a very successful film, and it was purchased by the Irish Museum of Modern Art, and it was shown in a couple of really good biennales. And I also, at the time, curated projects with other fellow artists called the House Projects, where we talked about making pop-up galleries in these dysfunctional spaces or homes, especially under the guise of das Unheimlich, as Freud's notion of the uncanny, which actually literally translates as unhomeliness. And this became a kind of a tome that would run through my work, unhomeliness. And I made a whole series of these things called performative films, where I discussed about, especially during our massive recession, which happened in 2007 and has just recently stopped, how the rise of anxiety disorders, eating disorders, and dysfunction made us feel possessed as a people, especially women, not having bodily autonomy, which was another big thing in our country. So actually, I should explain what a performative film is. I perform to the camera, but I am also behind the camera at the same time when I make my films. So I use remote controls to control the cameras, to take the thousands and thousands of photographs to make these stop motion animations. So for example, with this work, which is a film called Possession, I lay down on the grass, moved the scissors a little bit, put the remote in my mouth, went clack, the remote in my mouth, took the photograph, got back out of the shot, got the lawnmower in, cut the grass half foot, put the lawnmower back out of the shot, and to get back down with the scissors to take the photograph. So I was equally possessed when making this film, which took nearly a year or two to make. This entire film is shot in one of those redundant housing estates, and it, like Katerina's notion of a protagonist being a building, the housing estates, these ghost estates, have become a kind of a character in my work. Like everybody has these fucking garages in Ireland because America had them, and nobody puts their cars in them. They just fill them with all their shit from IKEA and stuff like that. That doesn't work anymore. But everybody wants their sliced bread in the morning. So I was kind of making this kind of Samuel Beckett slapstick kind of comment about architectural dysfunction in this work. Okay, why am I talking about these works? Because I not only practice as an artist, I'm also interested in this notion of the othered voice and those that are made to feel other. So, right, okay, you're probably figuring out how did I make the chair go in and out of the ground. I literally cut the legs off the chair a little inch at a time. Anyway, sorry. So, I have an ongoing relationship with two artist-led initiatives based in the west of Ireland. And they are run by adults, artists with intellectual disabilities. Another interesting thing about adults with intellectual disabilities in our country is they do not enjoy the full status as proper human beings. So legally, somebody with an intellectual disability is not allowed to have sex outside marriage according to our constitution, and as such those marriages do not happen. And in a lot of cases they were forced sterilised so that they wouldn't enjoy the freedoms that we do. So I said, we were working actually in two ways. We were working on the idea of setting up a film artist-led cooperative. And this is in this region called Mayo. The nearest capital is Galway, which is actually a UNESCO World City of Film. And we talked about the power of moving image and being a medium to convey dysfunction and function. So I started by showing my collaborating artists the films of Buster Keaton, and in a second I'll show you Charlie Chaplin, who lived in the west of Ireland. We also had thousands upon thousands of these cinemas, which some of the building styles you might recognize, which came from our unique history to moving image. One of the oldest films ever made was shot in the west coast of Ireland in the 1870s, is of a whaling film which was shot off the coast of Omea Island in Mayo. And this film is part of our National Archives, and I started by showing my collaborating artists this film and saying, you know, we have a unique connection to visual culture here that hasn't really been explored. And let's talk about how we could empower you to make a comment about human rights abuses through your films. So we made a moving image. What I was going to say was, first of all, I showed them the film The Kid by Charlie Chaplin, which I don't know if you've ever seen this film, but that is a great example of moving image work that was talking about socio-disadvantage and human rights abuse without ever a word being spoken because it was silent. My collaborators, this is Karen O'Donoghue, for example, they do not have a political party. They do not have a political adjutant to talk about the fact that they cannot have sex outside marriage, they cannot enjoy full autonomy. But so the notion of something being silent was a really important thing to work with them on. So I showed them the Kid, and they decided that they were going to make a love story based on your kind of cliche love story of a hero, a villain, and all that. I'm just going to show you a little clip of what that looked like. And we worked with a dancer sorry, I don't know why that would work there. Okay. We worked with a dancer to choreograph with them their movements so they would learn all the tricks of slapstick and the same kind of frame rate that would have been used in silent movie eras. Everything was shot, the score was written and directed by my fellow collaborating artists. And in the film itself, they talk about the planning of their city as a human rights abuse. So the city council make these disabled parking spots, right? But you can't open the door of your access vehicle because of the signage to advertise the use of the disabled parking vehicle. Dysfunction. Okay, so this is all becomes a part of the film. And then, of course, in these cinemas, we talk about the notion of love. These buildings were loved by people. They came in their thousands, and cinema was a really democratizing medium for conveying stuff. And all around Mayo and the west of Ireland, there would be travelling orchestras that didn't have any musical scores, that the films would just be played, and improvly they would respond by making pieces of music to what they were seeing on screen. And so you will see that I got the descendants, let this one talk here.
So my name is Aideen Barry, and I'm a visual artist, and I'm based in the west of Ireland. One of the things that we were very interested in was how it would work as a collaboration, a team of people coming up with ideas. So the artists had expressed the idea that they would love to work on a silent movie. So a conversation came about how we could use humour to talk about something that was quite difficult. So the artists of Scanner Technologies and the Ridgefield Centre developed a story, and the story is it's your kind of cliched love story, but it is rooted in very real experiences of living in Ballina with a disability and what it's like to live in 2014 with a disability and how things are infringed upon you. Ignite Award gave us this platform to have a loudspeaker where these artists haven't been able to voice these things before in the past. It's really about the art and how we can support the artists to make really exceptional artwork, and I think that's really where things should be emerging. If they're not seeing the disability first, they're actually seeing the project first and the merit of the project. I really hope that this project kind of throws a spotlight to that kind of evolution in the philosophy of arts and disability practice.
Okay. And then the film had a massive debut, and we got nominated for Modern Ireland and 100 Artworks, which was 100 years of independence from Britain, and selecting each individual artwork associating with a year. And I covered anything from Samuel Beckett to James Joyce, some names you would know. And then the public had to vote for the artwork of 2015. And amazingly, we captured the imagination of the Irish public, and they voted for this, and it became the 2015 work, which was published by Fitz O'Toole and the Royal Irish Academy. And it got huge critical interest because we were talking about human rights abuses. And suddenly it was discussed on the floor of the Dáil that this law existed. And after years of being fined by the EU for not ratifying the UN Convention of Human Rights, in 2018, on the 12th of April, the UN Convention of the Rights of the Disabled was ratified, and now this law will be changed. And it was amazing how the power of one particular artwork did that. But this is not the first time an artist in Ireland would have traversed the word of socio-political discourse and dysfunction. One of our greatest heroes, one of our foundations of the state, Padraig Pearse, was a poet and was killed in 1916 for being one of the reasons the started rising. But he wanted to preserve our language as a colonized country and hidden history. He wanted to bring back Gaeilge, which is actually my language, even though I'm speaking in English. Just to give you an example, if a child went to school in Ireland under British rule, they had to wear this, which is called a tally-stick or a bottom score around their neck. And if you spoke Gaeilge, or language, a notch was carved on the wood. And by the end of the day, the number of notches was the flogging you could get for speaking your language. So, in his as an adjunct to what he was doing, he created this school against British authority, an education space in one of the Georgian buildings which he lived in Dublin. He created the first Irish-speaking Gael school for children so they could speak their language and try and preserve our language and history and hidden heritage in this space. And in 2011, this building, which had gone into ruin, became funded under the Irish state and under the EU for redevelopment to become a functioning school again in a domestic home. That was Padraig Pearse's actual home and for school, for Gael School East Nanog. So this is the building, which is the original Georgian building, and it has an extension off to the side, which is this contemporary glass structure. And I was shortlisted to be one of 5 artists to make a public artwork in this space. So when I arrived and saw that this is the school and has all these beautiful architectural Georgian features, which is the curved glass ceiling, I said I had to do something around that, but also the notion that there's a contemporary juxtaposition that was happening with the building itself. The really interesting thing about the school is that it has all these homely features, but the school itself, because it's in a tiny domestic home, the children can never all meet together as a school, and they have to start at different times of the day. They have to have their lunch at different times of the day and all this sort of thing. And this notion of time and the confusion of all of getting in and around to all your different breaks, your time in the dance hall, your Lowerlin or the access to the library became an important thing. So, and also Irish history and thinking around the sacredness of some Irish animals. So I was thinking about time, and I decided to make these kinetic objects that would exist in the alcoves and historically important architectural spaces and contemporary spaces in the school. So the proposal was the Irish hare, Georí na Rira, is a very sacred animal. So I would make a robotic hare that would hold a prism up to the light in going through a Georgian window at 12 o'clock in the day. It would hit a prism and cause a rainbow on the other side of the wall, and the children would catch it. So this is what this looked like, which is a mechanical taxidermied hare that operated like so. And this is a child that's full position about to catch the rainbow to tell Round Hain, which is the first class, that it's time to start school or to have their lunch, depending. And then this is the causality clock. So my proposal was like the theory of causality. When a butterfly flaps its wings in Panama, it causes a hurricane in Osaka. I propose everything through moving image, and then this is what the piece looks like. So this kinetic robotic work, the butterflies flap their wings and they cause the windmills to turn, and that sits in the Georgian window. And then the galloping snails clock, which I think turned them all into gamblers, because what I did was I made these kinetic robotic snails that went around a floating slime track that hung between the old school building and now the new contemporary thing. And each day there was a different snail winner. It was a bit disruptive because the kids all kept on betting which one was going to win on the day. And then this is called the Symphony of Scissors clock. So the plan was, which was kind of a nod to the room being used by Padre Pierce's wife in the afternoon. So this was a symphony and scissors clock, and this went over the mantelpiece and rang a cuig, which is 5th class, and this would go off every day to alert the children that was the end or the beginning of school. So this, you see, that's lovely, these little domestic things that still exist in the thing. And the whole project is available on an amazing resource about public art and its engagement on publicart.ie, which is an Irish thing. I'll be very quick now. I'm going to talk about Strange Train. So in 2014, I was commissioned by the EU across 3 different countries in Northamptonshire in the United Kingdom, which is still part of the EU, hopefully, at the moment, Mayo in the west of Ireland, and Catalonia in Spain. And there were 3 artists, Chevy Vaiona, myself, which you recognise, and Noah Rhodes from England. And all 3 areas had in common, they were former railway lines. And they would all been shut down for various different reasons. In Catalonia, Franco blew the train line up from Aloft to Girona during the Spanish Civil War. In Northamptonshire, Thatcher, the fucking bitch, sorry, decided to shut it down, caused massive unemployment in the region, leading to UKIP, leading to Brexit. And in the west of Ireland, there was lots of reasons why the railway shut down, but they were all being now converted to greenways. So I decided to make this project called Strange Terrain, which is incidentally the topic of my discussion, because I was very interested in things that are hidden and invisible, like human rights abuses, but also like protagonists from the canon who have been erased from the canon, like this amazing woman called Lilias Campbell Davidson, who was an incredible character and wrote this book called Installated Travellers as an advocate because she believed the key to women's emancipation was through the bicycle and the railway line. And she wrote this book, incidentally, in the 1890s when all 3 railway lines were first established. And she also set up the first ever women's cycling federation in the world, and was an amazing mathematician, ended up her days teaching economics and Swahili and the London School of Economics. And I bet, except for those who've seen me talk about this before, you have never heard of her. Am I right?
Right.
Why is that? Anyway, amazing woman, and she totally and utterly believed that this book would have this power to affect women's liberation at a time where it was not encouraged for women to travel independently. So she wrote this book, which was this guide to how to navigate the international railway lines, but also it was completely mad, which is why I loved her. This was her description of how to turn a domestic bathtub into